Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this CLE entitled A Cautionary Tale for Lawyers Recognizing and Climbing Out of Addiction. My name is Megan Murray. I'm a business and bankruptcy lawyer in Tampa, and I'm moderating this webinar today for the solo and small firm section of the Florida Bar, where I serve on the executive council. We are a dynamic section of the Florida Bar that offers great opportunities and resources to those who are solos or in smaller firms, and I encourage you to get involved. I'd like to start today with some housekeeping matters. First, you will need to log on to the Florida Bar's member portal to enter your own CLE credit. The course number for the CLE today is 8617, and it is approved for 1 hour of general credit and 1 hour of substance abuse credits. Next, I would like to recognize our sponsors, whose logos are provided on the slides at the end of this program. These include Florida Lawyers Mutual, InfoTrack, Clio, Aligned CPA, U.S. Century Bank, Alonzo Appeals, Gilbert Garcia Group PA, Massey Law Group, RT and AP Mediation and Law Group. Our speaker today will be Scott Spradley. Scott is a member of the Florida Bar and is in his 36th year of practice, with the last 30 years primarily being in the bankruptcy arena and estate planning areas. While at Gray Robinson firm in Orlando, Scott founded that firm's bankruptcy group back in 1997. Scott now lives in Flagler Beach, where he maintains his bankruptcy practice and where he has a growing landscape and seascape photography business. And I would really encourage you to go out there and Google that because it is absolutely stunning. In 2003, Scott was elected by the residents of Flagler Beach to serve as city commissioner, where Scott presently serves as chairman of the board. Scott's greatest accomplishments are with his wife, Susan Spradley, his 23-year-old daughter, Allison Spradley, who is a recent graduate of Florida Gulf Coast University, and his continuous sobriety, which currently stands at 14 years and 8 months. But who's counting? Scott, I'm turning it over to you.
Hey everybody, my name is Scott. I'm an alcoholic, and I say that so frequently at usually AA meetings or other confidential meetings. And as a footnote, I can't tell you how many times in court, usually at the beginning of a fairly stressful hearing, that I've just about said that. And I'm pleased to report I haven't said that yet. Hopefully I never will. But anyway, I'm happy for all of you to join today. This is not just an important topic for me personally, but for many in the legal community. As you'll see from some of the statistics that I'll be going through about problem drinking and alcoholism in the legal community, statistics run about double those in the general population. And that's based on self-reporting. So my guess is the number's higher, because I can't imagine anyone would report themselves as having a problem with alcohol when they don't, but I can certainly envision many who don't report or weren't a part of the survey who do have that issue. So what I wanted to do today is sort of give you what I have learned over the years in sobriety. I actually just celebrated my 15th anniversary of continuous sobriety a couple of weeks ago. And then I'll weave in some of my experience with some of these statistics and historical data that I'm going to cover, just to give it a little bit of something more you can relate to. I would say that as I tell my story, probably no one will be able to identify with everything I've experienced when it comes to alcohol and recovery, but I'm sure that all of you will be able to identify with at least some of what I'm saying, whether if it's not an issue that you may be experiencing. I'm sure that you have friends, family, colleagues, employees, employers, but anyone within your circle, there's always the existence of those who are struggling with alcohol, some of whom have taken positive steps to address it, many who have not. So I'm hopeful today that just in sharing my experience and what I've learned over the last 15 years, that you may be able to draw some nuggets of information that will be helpful to you in some way. First of all, I'm not a counselor. I'm not an addiction therapist. I'm none of that. I'm just a lawyer like most of you. And for me, it's important to try to reach out and make an attempt to share information in the hope that it will help others. I know many who are in recovery, which is to say they've acknowledged they have a problem with alcohol and are doing something about it, elect to keep the lid on it, keep it very quiet and private. And that is absolutely fine. Whatever works for you works for you. For me, I got into the habit of reaching out to others and sharing my story early on. And I think when I look back on that, part of it's selfish, I mean, certainly I do it to try to encourage others to seek help, which is out there. But I think selfishly, I think I tried to paint myself into a corner. The more people I tell about it, then the less likely I am to, go back out, as it were. And another note on recovery from alcoholism, I don't think there's anyone in the medical community or anywhere else who would say that you can magically be cured. I think the issue is that you need to continue whatever works for you to maintain sobriety, whatever that may be. But there's an old saying in the circles of AA, which is but one way to try to help yourself, which is one day at a time. And for me, that is absolutely critical. I'm still actively practicing. I have the same stresses as everyone does when it comes to the law practice, to my personal life, to anything associated with my professional life. And now I've taken on this role as city commissioner of Flagler Beach. Adds another level of stress. And so every morning when I wake up, I look at it as a new day. And my goal is simply to maintain sobriety for that day. And, if you look too far in the past or look too far in the present or in the future, you may be creating challenges that are unnecessary. So one day at a time is how I go. All right. So as I go through, I'm going to start with a little bit of my story, and then we'll go to some slides that I have and some statistics. There is a handout, a 4-page handout, which you don't need to really have in front of you now because I'm just going to be picking points from it. And after the fact, I urge you to at least take a look at the material, because there are some places where you can go online and calls that you can make, and other areas where you can find more information and help if you or someone needs it. For me, I'm a native of Shelby, North Carolina, where I went through high school. I played golf. I played well, so I got a golf scholarship to the University of Miami and played on the team down there. And then eventually I went to law school in Tallahassee. And before you ask, had I been as successful in the golf career as I had intended, then I wouldn't be here today. So that was that. I think that, looking back 15 years ago, when I acknowledged to myself that I had a problem with alcohol, it was a problem that probably went all the way back to when I was in law school. But as most good alcoholics do, I did not acknowledge that at the time. In fact, for years, I didn't acknowledge it. I did not admit it to myself. And I think that's pretty common. Those of us who fall into the habit of using alcohol as a means to cope with stress and other things, it's difficult because of the stress relief that you get temporarily. It's difficult to acknowledge that as a real problem until you have issues resulting from that. And so for me, I think my problem drinking began when I was in my 20s, and but I didn't really realize it till later. I have this PowerPoint that I'll sort of go through as we go. Let's see. There we are. And I will say this throughout this seminar today. If you suspect that you have difficulty with alcohol, the first thing that needs to happen before you're able to address it, in my opinion, is to admit to yourself that there's a problem. I know for many, and I'll go back, I referenced AA for Alcoholics Anonymous. I know that anytime, if you were to go to a meeting, there's always people around the outskirts of the room with arms folded, who are maybe listening, maybe not. And I know who those people are. Those are typically people who have been sent to the rooms of AA by either their spouse or their employer or by the judge. And that's difficult for there to be a high level or high rate of success if you're there for because of someone other than yourself. And I've seen that over the years, that in order to have success in addressing successfully the problems with alcohol, you have to want it for yourself. I've come into contact with a lot of colleagues and friends over the year who say, Scott, my wife, she's uncontrollably drinking to excess. What can I do? And the answer is really, there's nothing that you can do other than to, in whatever way works, open the door to conversation and to encourage addressing it. But it really is dependent upon the person who's having the issue to take care of the issue. Laura Baugh, 1975. This was when I took a semester off from college, which turned into 6 years. And I think I had a good time because I don't remember too much about it. But one of the things I did was I was a caddy on the LPGA tour for Laura Baugh, who at the time was one of the best golfers in the world. And she's a part of this story. And oh, by the way, that would be me in the background of that picture. But I just wanted to plant that seed here because she'll turn up in the story later on. Those of us who are in the legal profession, probably more so than in the community generally, we're exposed to social settings with alcohol. That's just the way it rolls, and for many, alcohol is not a problem. And I'm not here, and nor have I ever been one to advocate prohibition of alcohol and for no one to drink. I mean, if I have a problem, it doesn't mean that you can't drink if you don't have a problem. So I'm not condemning social drinking whatsoever. I mean, heck, I love to drink. That's the problem. But it's just, for those of us who are predisposed to having problem drinking for whatever reason, then the social settings that we see in our legal community don't help that. Now, I mentioned the statistics, of which there's no shortage. The statistics on this PowerPoint are also contained in the materials that are available to you, and they all are sourced from various academic readings or from articles through the Florida Bar or the ABA or others. And some of them are kind of surprising. So here's one that classifies levels of drinking. So a light drinker would be for men less than 2 drinks a day, for women less than 1 drink a day. Moderate drinker, less than 3 drinks a day, for women less than 2 drinks a day. And then heavy drinker, and this was a shocker to me, more than 14 drinks per week or more than 4 drinks per occasion. for men. And when I first saw that, I thought, oh my gosh, I've been a heavy drinker since I was in high school, you know? And then binge drinking is more than 5 drinks in one occasion for men and more than 4 drinks in one occasion for women. And here are the legal profession statistics, and you'll see variations of this through the PowerPoint, but they're all consistent with one another, despite the sample group and despite who's manipulating or gathering the statistics. They're all pretty much the same. In the legal profession, addiction rates, and that would include alcohol plus other substances, 18 to 20%. While in the general population, it's a little less than half of that. Chemical dependency, drugs or alcohol. And then the use of alcohol or drugs is present in some way or other in 40 to 70% of lawyer discipline cases. And we'll come to more on that later. Here's a further breakdown of problem drinking statistics and other things in the legal community. Noteworthy is in the middle of the page to the right, where it shows the person on the stairs with what looks like a bottle of wine. Statistics show that problem drinking among junior associates, 31%, senior associates, 26%, junior partner, 24%, managing partner, 21%, senior partner, 19%. Now, I'm not sure what to do with that trend, that as you get older and more experienced, then the percentage wise, it drops a little bit. I don't know what to make of that, except 31% is high and 19% is high. So there is just that. And then you see where statistically men are hovering at the 25% level of being problem drinkers, and women it's lighter than that. So here's some more alarming statistics that are available. Suicide rate is double among lawyers than that of the general population. And then we see again 18% alcoholics, double the national average, 33% mental disorders, and lawyers are 3.6 times more likely to suffer severe depression. And then among that group, statistically, 7 out of 10 lawyers would change careers. And again, just another set of statistics that ring consistent with the other ones. 1 in 5 lawyers suffer from alcoholism. 15 to 24% of people who work in the legal profession abuse alcohol. Another body of statistics, I guess, problem drinkers as opposed to alcoholics. I guess that's a higher number, between 21 and 30% of currently practicing attorneys qualify as problem drinkers. 19% are battling anxiety. The next statistic I have a problem with, 23% are having difficulty managing stress. 23%, I mean, I think it's about 100% of every lawyer I know is having difficulty managing stress, but that's what it says. 28% are struggling with depression. Now, before we get into different help groups for this, let me just take a minute to talk about the history of alcohol. I mean, where did all this begin? And this is also in the materials. The first historical tracings of alcohol go back to 4000 BC amongst the Egyptians, who used it for medicine and nutrition, as well as religious ceremonies. In 13th century England, ale was a dietary staple for children and for adults, and a commodity for commerce. And then it proceeds on to there. There are many biblical references to vineyards and wine, but there are also references to condemnation of drinking and excess. In the United States and colonial America, abuse of alcohol came to be considered a sin by the church morality arguments against it became popular. And then, of course, there was prohibition for a period of time. And then the problems with drinking became such that in 1935, Bill Wilson founded Alcoholics Anonymous, which is active and growing to this very day. The current consensus in the medical community is that alcoholism is now recognized as a medical disease with physical and psychological effects. And that's important when it comes to insurance. There was a time some years ago when alcoholism was not really recognized by the AMA as a disease. And so for those wanting treatment that required either counseling or in treatment facilities, otherwise known as rehab, insurance was not available, but now it is. Years ago, alcohol was viewed as primarily a ritualistic and recreational intoxicant. In other words, just it's your choice to get involved and presumably your choice to stop. It's generally accepted that there are negative health consequences that occur on a continuum in which the level of potential harm is relative to the amount and pattern of in individual's consumption. I guess that's a lot of words to say that the more you drink, the more you may harm yourself. But here's an eye-opening stat. Excessive use of alcohol is currently the third preventable leading cause of death in the United States, behind tobacco use and obesity. Third. And it contributes, that is, the use of alcohol contributes to over 200 diseases and related conditions. Now, with that said, there is the belief that there are potential benefits from light to moderate drinking, such as decreased risk of diabetes, stroke, or heart disease. So there is that. When it comes to the attorney and problem drinking or alcohol, it used to be the case that addiction or alcoholism was viewed as a moral failing, and the prospects for recovery are dim. And that was the case for many, many years until relatively recently. The current prevailing view is that addiction requires understanding of addictive illness, especially compulsivity and denial, with positive prospects for recovery when those components are addressed. It's also a topic within the Florida Bar and attorney regulation when it comes to alcoholism. The Florida Bar generally views addiction as a disease, and recovery is viewed as a mitigating factor in disciplinary proceedings with a proper showing of rehabilitation and restitution. Florida Supreme Court has also addressed the issue of alcohol when it comes to lawyers, and the Florida Supreme Court generally looks favorably on a lawyer's efforts at rehabilitation. All right, so now looking into the what do I do now phase of this, within the Florida Bar, there is the Florida Lawyers Assistance Program. And I have found that the materials you can find if you were to go to the Florida Lawyers Assistance link on the Florida Bar website are very helpful. I know some of those who run that organization, and they try their best to be current with any information that may help members of the Florida Bar or their family or colleagues or anyone else. And it's all confidential. So with that, let me step aside for a moment. I mentioned before that if you or someone you know has admitted that there is a problem with alcohol, and further that they want to do something about it, which is another step, then there is a general wariness among lawyers to reach out to the Florida Bar to report that you're struggling with alcohol and it may affect your job. And I understand that. I get it. You know, myself, I'm comfortable and I'm confident that there are high barriers between the Florida Lawyers Assistance Program and the Florida Bar. In other words, I do not perceive any chance that you could try to seek help for a severe problem with alcohol through the Florida Lawyers Assistance Program, only to find yourself being reported or being the subject of proceedings by the Florida Bar. But I get it that there may be that view. Well, thankfully, the Florida Lawyers Assistance Program is not the only place you can go. For those and lawyers that I've spoken with who do have that reluctance, there are many other avenues to try to seek help, and I'll get to those shortly. The Mental Health and Wellness Center is associated with the Florida Bar, and there's confidential information that you can exchange with them. There's a telephone number available. Here's something else in the Florida Lawyers Assistance Program. And again, you can go online, you can make a call at your leisure, everything's confidential. But here's some more statistics. So as you see in here, it says there's free and confidential support for attorneys, judges, and law students, discreet assistance, guidance, and resources, a trusted lifeline for Florida's legal community. And again, I vouch for that. But here's their statistics. 32% of lawyers under the age of 30 have a problem with alcohol and substance use. 28% of lawyers struggle with some form of depression. 19% of lawyers demonstrate symptoms of stress and anxiety. Again, too low, in my opinion. And then at the bottom, 11% of lawyers have had suicidal thoughts at some point in their career. Included in the body of information on the Florida Lawyers Assistance Program site, there's a Q&A section, and I just pulled a couple of them that I wanted to comment on. In the first one, in your experience, what are the 3 biggest mistakes lawyers make with regards to substance use before you see them that puts their license at risk? Answer: refusing to admit to themselves that there's a problem, believing that they can handle it by themselves, and refusing or postponing asking for help, even if they know help is available. I can identify with all that. At the beginning, Megan made my introduction and talking about one of my 2 greatest achievements is the raising of my daughter. That was with Susan. We have been divorced for probably 20 years. But I will say that as that marriage was ending, it was brought to my attention that problem drinking was one of the causes, if not the major cause, for the need for us to end our marriage. And when my divorce lawyer told me that Susan's divorce lawyer was told by Susan that that was an issue, I was shocked. I was so deep in denial, I was absolutely shocked to hear that. And at the time, I just chalked it up as divorce warfare. You know, I just thought that's all this is. And to this day, when I go back at it, I didn't look at it as, yeah, I guess I do, or shoot, she found out. I mean, none of that. I just was absolutely convinced that I had no problem at all. And it was only through taking steps to recover after I admitted that I had a problem that I was able to really, you know, turn back the page and take a look at what was really happening. And for me, what was really happening was, yes, you would find me at the social gatherings where there's alcohol, just like everybody else. But what you didn't see was the drinking that I did secretly prior to then, or on the way there, or afterwards. And I think I just chalked it up as, well, that's part of the stress of being a lawyer, you know, and that's how I justified it at the time. I just didn't see a problem, probably because it didn't have visible impact on me. Now, the divorce, that's a real thing, you know, and maybe that got my attention a little bit. But before then, I went about my business. I had a good job. I was a shareholder over at Gray Robinson for a number of years. And when I look back on it, you know, I just didn't have the consequential impact of my problem drinking. I was a good alcoholic. I was able to hide it, And I was able to get through my day with really no one knowing anything about it but me. And of course, I didn't even realize it. So in that first part there, refusing to admit there's a problem, well, that was me. Believing they can handle it by themselves, absolutely, that was me. And refusing or postponing asking for help, even if I know help is available. Well, that comes later, but that was me too for a spell. The second question there, based on your experience in general, what are the three most important things a lawyer who is struggling can do as soon as possible to put himself or herself in the best position to continue practicing law, even if there are temporary consequences? And the answer, find out what resources are available and use them, engage in the appropriate level of treatment, and stick with the program. So obviously I vouch for all that. Now, in my personal case, since I went through a 17-year marriage without thinking I had a problem with alcohol, I certainly took no steps to change. I didn't think there was a problem. In fact, going back to my divorce, when I was told by my divorce lawyer that my then wife thought I had a drinking problem, I was outraged. I think my words to her were, to my lawyer were, I don't have a drinking problem, but if I do, it's because of her. And I think that's what I said, and I believed it with all my heart. So as that divorce wound down, I like to say she got the big house, I got the beach house. So we had a place in Flagler Beach. For a year, I continued to commute from Flagler Beach to Orlando to the Gray Robinson firm, but finally I just got tired of the commute. And so I wound up opening shop over here in 2007, I want to say. But once I moved over here to Flagler Beach, after the divorce was over, I realized after 4 or 5 months, I just woke up one day feeling particularly bad from the events of the night before having to do with alcohol. And I distinctly remember thinking, you know what? I'm drinking double what I used to. And I can't blame Susan for it now because she's gone. And it was only then that I began to give at least a tiny bit of thought to maybe I have a problem that needs to be looked at. And so I think at the time, for me personally, having that realization just got me depressed. And I think I actually drank more for a while because I was involved in self-pity, I guess, for lack of a better term. And that was probably accurate. But finally, for me, I hit my bottom. And there's no event that I can track it to. I know for a lot of people, you really have to hit your bottom before you affirmatively want to reach out for help. And sometimes that bottom can be a DUI. It could be, for lawyers, issues with the Florida bar, issues with clients. It could be any number of things, family issues. And for me, I think it's just, I finally just had the realization that my life was absorbed by alcohol, and I no longer had a good excuse to continue on the path I was on. So what I did, I reached out to a counselor. I went to an addiction therapist. And as many good alcoholics do, my objective was to have him manage my drinking. All right. That's just a term that countless people I know who are either in recovery or who've tried to be in recovery but have been unsuccessful think that that's where it starts. You want to manage your drinking. In my case, I could not envision, nor would I even try to envision life without alcohol. Alcohol accompanied me everywhere. It's probably the longest continuous relationship I had with anybody or anything was alcohol, going from high school all the way up to then present. And, it was there when I was celebrating. It was there when social setting. It was there when I was mad. It was there when I was sad. And really all facets of my life, it involved alcohol. So the idea, as crazy as it may seem, to say I don't have a drinking problem, but I don't want to stop because I do it with everything that I do in my life. I mean, but that's just the way a good alcoholic thinks, in my experience with me and with many others. So anyway, I go to see this addiction counselor to tell him that I want to manage my drinking. And of course, he rolled his eyes and said, "Do you have a problem with alcohol?" I said, "Oh, no. I just got a stressful job, and coming out of the divorce and such, I just, I drink a little bit just to help with stress." So the addiction therapist said to me, "Well, if you just want to manage your drinking, how about you try this? How about not drink for 30 days? And I'm like, "No way, I'm not going to do that. How do I deal with the stress?" And so he said, "But you don't have a problem with alcohol?" No, no problem with alcohol, but I'm not going to do that. After about 10 minutes of conversation, the addiction therapist pronounced me an alcoholic. And I remember saying, "How dare you? You don't even know me." And his response was, "Scott, I know you better than you know you." So those words, they didn't register deeply with me, but at least I thought, okay, I need to think about it. So that began a series of 2 or 3 months where I was seeing him every week to manage my drinking. And he began to give me these tasks to try from week to week. The first one was, he said, "All right, Scott, before you come see me next week, how about just drink every other day? If you don't have a problem with alcohol, then that should be enough to get you through your stress." So as a good alcoholic, I remember thinking, okay, there's 7 days in a week. How can I time this so that I get to drink 4 days and be off 3 days versus the other way around? And I did that. So when I came back the next week and he asked if I did it, just drank every other day, I said, "Of course." And he said, "How was it?" And I said, "It wasn't so awesome." And when he asked why, I told him, I said, "Well, on the day I could drink, I found myself drinking all the way up until the clock struck midnight. And then beginning the next afternoon, I would spend my day and evening looking at the clock, waiting for it to strike midnight again for another drinking day." And he said, and I said, "Oh, by the way, I probably drank twice as much in the week where I'm drinking every other day than I did otherwise." He said, "But you still don't have a problem with alcohol?" I said, "No, no, no, just trying to manage it." So the next task he gave me was, he said, "Okay, how about you just drink on the weekend?" Weekend. Thought, all right, well, that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday Night Football and Monday, right? And he's like, "No, you don't get Monday. You shouldn't get Friday." But he said, okay. So I did it. Came back the next week, announced that I drank only on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I even skipped Monday Night Football. And he asked me how I did. And I said, it was horrible. I drank easily as much or more in those 3 days as I normally would in 7 days. And he said, "You still don't have a problem with drinking?" And I said no, but it was a lighter version of no. And so I began slowly but surely to realize not only that I had a problem, but it may be outside my ability to control. So one thing led to another. And finally, he suggested that if I wanted to have real help with my drinking, and if I was going to entertain real solutions, that I needed to go to what he said was a treatment facility, a residential treatment facility, he said. I said, "Okay, as long as it's not a rehab." He's like, "Scott, that's what it is." I mean, I was totally ignorant of all these things. So I wound up taking him up on that and I had someone watch my practice, and I did that. Luckily, it occurred at a time when insurance covered such things, so that helped me out. But we'll circle back to that in a minute. All right. Causes of high rates of addiction in corporate and legal professionals. So here's what somebody has attributed part of the problem to: high caseloads and unrealistic performance expectations, a corporate culture that rewards workaholism, lack of personal time for family, self-care, or recreation, a professional atmosphere that promotes competition rather than mutual support. And I think for those, I know this is solo and small firm section, but for those of us who worked at a large firm over the years, you can absolutely relate to that one about a professional atmosphere that promotes competition and thus stress. I mean, I could be best friends with the lawyer next to me when I was at that firm, but we always had each other's eyes on our receipts, on our billable time and all of that. It was always competition. And then lack of education about the risks and signs of substance abuse or mental illness. I mentioned AA, and I'm not affiliated with AA other than I go to meetings. In my personal case, it has helped, you know. There's other avenues. I think some people who haven't really been exposed to different areas of support available for problem drinking and alcoholism have kind of a negative view of AA based on what someone may say or whatnot. I know I was a little uneasy about that at the beginning, but all my issues were resolved by the time I went to one or two meetings. I remember initially when I got out of that rehab and came back to Flagler Beach, and I was told that my mission was to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I'm like, oh my God, that's impossible. And like, no, it's not. And so one of the initial hurdles for me, and I shared it with my counselor at the time, was, well, heck, this Flagler Beach is a little town. I can't go to an AA meeting here. I'm gonna have to go to like Jacksonville or somewhere. I said, why? I said, goes like, what if I know somebody or somebody knows me? And that was met with laughter. It's like, Scott, if you see somewhere, anyone you know in there, they're there for the same reason you're there. And so I found that to be true. And to this day, if I'm in a meeting, there may be someone there who I know. It could be a client. It could be another lawyer. It could be a judge, you know, but there's just, in my experience, at least, the anonymity stays there. It's just the way it is. So I've had nothing but good experiences with AA. Personally, it's helped me, and I know many others, including many in the legal community, who it's helped and helps them stay on course. You know, the focus again is just on you're wanting to get relief from the burden of alcohol. And if you want that, then help is there. I know, and it sounds odd for those who haven't been to an AA meeting, but some of the things that are shared in there, I've shared stuff in there as it comes up, as it's relevant to whatever the conversation is. Some things that I've shared with these people that I've never shared with anybody else. And I may know them only by their first name, and I may never have or never will see them outside of those rooms. There's just this collegiality that sort of develops there, which is, in my case, it's been very helpful. The slide that is up now, Central Florida AA, it's called the Central Florida Intergroup. And what it is just a place for information. You can go on there and you can, as you see, one of the tabs is about AA, tells you a little bit about it. Find a meeting. There's a zillion meetings for AA that you can find that fit your schedule. Now, I know during COVID, there was a real problem in the recovery community everywhere. And that's because when everything was shut down, that included AA meetings. And there are a lot of people then and now who rely on taking that 1 hour a day to go get help and meet with others. And all of a sudden that resource vanished. And so there were some real issues, and a lot of people had a rough time during that spell. But before too long, Zoom came to the rescue. And so that began AA meetings being conducted by Zoom. And even though the pandemic ended, for the most part, those AA meetings continue to be conducted by Zoom. So even if you have difficulty these days in finding a live meeting that suits your schedule, AA Zoom meetings are around the clock. And obviously they don't have to be originating from where you live or anywhere near. I mean, I've actually attended AA meetings in Honolulu, for example, and I have a regular one that I still attend that happens to be in Orlando, just because I've gotten to know the folks there over the years. So there's no shortage. If you want it, it's there. This is just an example from that Central Florida AA website where it has all the meetings, and this schedule starts at 6:30 a.m. and it actually runs through midnight, so there's meetings everywhere. It gives location and it'll tell you if it's on Zoom or not. Okay, so back to my story again. So I was lucky, that number one, I wanted to recover once I realized that I had a problem, because that's, as you would imagine, human nature being what it is, there are those who may spend a lot of time drinking and developing problem drinking habits, who finally recognize they have a problem, but who do not seek to change for whatever reason. It's like, okay, so I drink too much, but I need to do this. And then that's a real danger sign that the problem gets worse, and then the real consequences, whatever they may be. So making the leap from admitting that you got a problem is one thing, but then there's another leap to doing something about it. So finally, in my case, after putting it off forever to make that admission to myself, and then spending months trying to fight with my therapist about how I'm not an alcoholic. So finally, I took him up on his suggestion that I go to the rehab. So I went to a place called the Hanley Center down in West Palm Beach, which has been around a while. And but I think still when I went down there, and that was October 9th, 2009, and that's my sobriety date. But I went down there and I was admitted thinking that, you know what, I'm here to manage my drinking. I still couldn't get away from that. I just had not accepted the fact that me and drinking don't mix, There's a bunch of corny AA sayings, and a lot of them I just laugh at. But one of them that really stands true for me, I now know, is that one drink is too many and 100 not enough. And that's the way it is for me and other alcoholics and problem drinkers, is that I can't have just one. I get people when these days we're having conversation, they talk about, oh, you've been sober for 15 years. Can't you just like have a glass of wine with dinner? I'm like, no, because even in my mind today, I can't even conceive of having one drink. That just doesn't make sense to me, because to me, one drink is just the entree to the next drink, which is the entree to the next drink. And it's just one of those things. It's just part of the disease, for many of us, including myself. So anyway, I got down to rehab, and I got told what you get told down there, you got to stop. So I resisted that for a couple of weeks. And finally, after all the counseling with the counselor, the psychologist, the psychiatrist, the group meetings, and all these things, you just get bombarded. And I had eyes open, but it took me a couple of weeks to realize, you know what, Scott, you're gonna have to quit drinking. So for the next 2 weeks, my thought was, okay, if I'm fortunate enough to be able to not drink, which I thought was highly doubtful, then I was going to live a life of misery. I was convinced of that because of what I said earlier, which is that everything I did, alcohol was looming somewhere in the background or the foreground, whether it's happy or sad, sporting event, go to the Daytona 500, whatever it may be. And so I figured, hell, I'm going to be miserable. And so I'm here to tell you today that turned out not to be the case. I've never been happier in my life than I am now, and than I have been for the last dozen or so years, that I can actually do everything I wanted to do without having alcohol. And then one thing that when I became sober, and others who I talked to became sober, is you realize that, you know what? Yeah, alcohol An evening with alcohol absolutely will reduce, minimize, or eliminate the stress that's has you captivated that day. But guess what? The next day, when you wake up, all that stress is right there again. And sometimes it's worse because you put off by a day whatever you should have been doing the day before. And so for me as a lawyer, I suspect that many can relate to that. You know, I hate stuff that I'm told in the morning by my legal assistant, I got to do this today because it's the deadline. And I hate stuff like that. And so, but you got to do it. You can't just like drink it away and then blow the deadline or even be more against the deadline. And so for me, alcohol is a contributing factor to those kinds of things getting worse. And thus elimination of alcohol helps those things get done more timely. All right, so here's where I was, the Hanley Center. One of the things they do there is they have what's called alumni night once a month. They assemble all the residents. I think there's around 90. There's a men's unit, a women's unit, and a senior unit. And so once a month, they have alumni come in who've been at Hanley before and who are celebrating a year or multiples of years of sobriety. And they're there to share their story about how, you know what, you can be happy and you can, if you work at it, maintain sobriety. And I remember for me, that was the highlight of my stay there. Because after getting bombarded from sun up to sundown by all these professionals about alcoholism and what to do about it, to have someone from the outside to come in and say, hey guys, guess what? You actually can be happy. This actually does work. That meant a lot to me to hear that. I remember thinking, you know, the odds that I can remain sober a year are pretty dim. But if I can, I'm going to come back and talk to the residents. And as luck and hard work would have it, I've gone every year. They just had the October celebration a week and a half ago, and I went down there for that. And it's great. It's great to see others who are in the spot I was in and to give them some comforting words and some hope. And there's always people you can just tell who are just thriving, wanting to hear things such as that. You know, and one footnote to that, when I quit drinking and started going to AA meetings and other things, my daughter was 8 years old. And since this was post-divorce, and she lived in Orlando with her mom, I had her just about every weekend. So while here, she would necessarily go with me when I went to an AA meeting on the weekend, and she would sit in the back and listen. And I caught on very early how she was attentive and listening and empathetic to those who were telling their stories. And she would ask me questions about it, and she took an incredible interest in it. So fast forward, you know, she graduated from Boone High School in Orlando, went to Florida Gulf Coast University in Fort Myers, where she graduated last year, majored in psychology. She wanted to be a counselor. And guess what? Today, she is a preventive specialist with the Hanley Foundation, the very place where I was at in rehab. So that's a miracle in and of itself that that world of coincidence will occur like that. And I think every parent wants to say they had a role in their child's career. And I'll be the first to tell you, mine was a bit sideways. It wasn't exactly how I would have planned it, but I'm really super proud of Allison for that. And that goes back to these monthly alumni meetings they have at the Hanley Center, is that they recognize those who are celebrating, and you get to have someone introduce you and say a few words. And this year at my 15th, and Allison was there to introduce me, and she was very kind with her words. It was pretty cool that there she was as an employee of the rehab. All All right, so here are these celebrations. Those are important to all of us, you know, who are recovering. That was 5 years, 10 years, and then a couple weeks ago, 15 years. And for me, my sobriety anniversary is replaced birthday, Christmas, New Year's, 4th of July, all of that, and its importance because of the impact that it's had on my life. Back to Laura Barr. I told you that I was her tour caddy back in 1975. I was, let's see, Laura was 20, I was 19, traveling the country. You know, she was, as I said, one of the best golfers in the world, and a very nice person. Well, it was only years later, about 20 years ago, where Laura had then retired. She was an announcer for the Golf Channel for golf events. And it was in the Orlando Sentinel that she was admitted to the hospital after a visit to the emergency room for alcohol poisoning and near death. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, what's that about? And then it came out later in an interview where she said she was a chronic alcoholic and has been attempting to recover. And that was before I admitted that I had a problem. So lo and behold, a few years ago, and I had not been in contact with Laura since the mid-70s, but few years ago, I'm wandering the halls of Mall at Millennia and I run into Laura. And this was after I became sober. And so she's now coming up on what, 30 years? So it's just funny how these life coincidences kind of run together. All right, so we're kind of at the end of my story. The way I get by, you know, is I don't take for granted that just because I have a nice track record behind me of 15 years, I have no guarantee that I'm going to get through even today. I mean, I love to drink. What can I say? That's what I did, but I have to not drink. And so how do you not do that? And in addition to going meetings, the readings, relying on others who are on a similar path. And these 4 words mean a lot to me. Recognition that I can't drink. I can't. Action, which is being involved in my recovery program and making it go forward every single day. Gratitude, you know, gratitude is easy to have when things are going well. Gratitude is more difficult when things aren't going well. You have to look at what are you grateful for. And for me, among other things, it's not picking up a drink for that particular day. I have a world of gratitude for that, all of which brings serenity to me. And then finally, oh, that's my daughter. I just want to make a mention of this. Peter Hill, some of you in the bankruptcy community in particular will remember Peter. He was with the Wolf Hill McFarland firm for years. He was a competitor of mine. But when I needed someone to watch after my law practice while I was going to rehab, I called on Peter and he said, no problem. And he had me drop off 5 boxes of my client files while I was gone for what turned out to be 60 days. He did everything that needed to be done. And when I got back, he wouldn't take a dime for it. So there are these special people out there. And unfortunately, we lost Peter a couple of years ago, but I had to mention him because he really had a role in my recovery without even realizing it. So with that, I want to thank everyone again for being here today. I hope some of what I said may ring true for you or someone you know, and hopefully it'll lead to taking affirmative steps to try to get help if it's needed. And Megan, I appreciate your having me here today.
Scott, thank you so much. I think I speak for all of us when we probably all know somebody who's struggling, whether it's the legal community or a family member or just somebody in the world that we know is out there who's struggling. And it's really heartening to hear people willing to talk about it and share their stories. I think it helps us all. So really appreciate you being here today. This is something that obviously affects our legal community. So again, thank you for sharing your story. I've got for the folks that are on, we've got almost 30 people that have been able to participate. I wasn't able to drop the materials in the box, the chat box, But I'm gonna put my email address in here, and I'm happy to email you, or you can reach out to Scott directly. I'm sure he's happy to email you the program materials, the PowerPoint, the outline from today. He's obviously reachable, and I encourage you to reach out to him directly as well if you have any questions or comments. Please also take a moment. There is a QR code that's going to be up on the screen here in a minute. If you wouldn't mind giving your time to a brief survey to help our solo and small firm section of the Florida Bar, that would be fantastic. We hope that you found this program helpful. Also, don't forget to go out there and log your own credit. The course number is 8617. Again, that's 8617. And my email address, if you want the materials, it's mmurray@underwoodmurray.com. And let me see if I can find Scott. Could you just give them your email address as well, since you're still here?
Sure, and feel free to email me if you have any questions or want information, but it's Scott with 2 T's at flaglerbeachlaw.com.
Wonderful. Thank you all again today. Thank you, Scott. Thank you to Gabby for helping us host this. And don't forget to log your credit. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all.